What the hell are you doing in my daughter's room? Richard Whitmore's voice cracked through the mansion like thunder, sharp enough to freeze the air. Grace Miller stood beside the little girl's bed, one hand still resting lightly on 8-year-old Lily's shoulder. The bedside lamp cast a pale amber glow across the room, catching the tremble in Grace's fingers and the rainwater dripping from Richard's coat onto the hardwood floor. Lily was asleep for the first time in days, breathing softly, peacefully. But Richard did not see peace. He saw betrayal. His jaw tightened as he stepped closer, expensive leather shoes striking the floor with cold precision. You think because I hired you, you get to play family? He said, voice low, dangerous. Grace swallowed hard. Sir, she was scared. Do not speak for my daughter. The words landed harder than the storm rattling against the windows. Downstairs, somewhere deep in the house, the grandfather clock chimed midnight. Grace lowered her eyes for a second, heat rising to her face. She had been in the Whitmore estate less than 3 weeks. Long enough to know Richard Whitmore trusted no one. Not the chefs. Not the tutors. Certainly not the black maid who cleaned hallways and folded laundry while everyone else pretended she was invisible. But Lily had cried tonight. Really cried. Not the spoiled kind. The frightened kind. The kind that shook a child from the inside out. Grace had heard it through 2 closed doors while dusting the upstairs landing. When she found Lily hiding under her late mother's vanity table, clutching an empty pill bottle with shaking hands, she had not stopped to ask permission. Richard stepped closer. The scent of rain, expensive cologne, and cold anger surrounded him. How many rooms in this house did you think you could wander into before crossing a line? Grace looked toward Lily, still sleeping beneath the blankets, cheeks finally dry after an hour of tears. I was trying to help her. Richard let out a humorless laugh. Help? His gaze dropped to the medicine bottle sitting on the nightstand. Half empty. His expression darkened instantly. Did you touch her medication? Grace hesitated. Too long. His face hardened. Unbelievable. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a thick fold of cash, and shoved it onto the dresser. Take it. Consider it severance. You are done here. Grace stared at the money but did not move. Outside, thunder rolled low across the Connecticut sky. Somewhere in the hallway, a security camera hummed faintly overhead. Sir, she said quietly, voice trembling despite herself. Please check on Lily in an hour. Richard's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Just please. The softness in her tone somehow irritated him more. You really expect me to trust you after sneaking into my child's room? He snapped. I said leave. Grace nodded slowly. No argument. No tears. Just exhaustion settling into her shoulders like winter cold. She picked up her coat from the chair, smoothing the worn sleeve with careful fingers. Before leaving, she looked back at Lily one last time. The little girl stirred slightly in her sleep, whispering something too soft to hear. Grace's throat tightened. Then, quietly, almost invisible in the dim light, she slipped a folded letter beneath the lamp beside the bed. Richard noticed the movement instantly. What is that? Grace paused at the doorway. Her hand tightened around the strap of her bag. Something you should read, she whispered. Richard scoffed. Trust me, there is nothing you could possibly tell me about my daughter that I do not already know. Grace looked at him for a long moment, something unreadable flickering behind tired eyes. Not anger. Not fear. Something heavier. Then she glanced once toward the hallway camera blinking silently overhead. Are you sure about that? She said softly. And for the first time that night, Richard stopped breathing for half a second. Because suddenly, he remembered the security system had mysteriously gone offline for exactly 17 minutes before he got home. Richard Whitmore's jaw tightened. 17 minutes. The number hit him harder than he expected. Rain tapped against the tall windows like impatient fingers while the tiny red light on the hallway camera blinked silently overhead. Grace stood frozen near the doorway, coat in hand, shadows stretching across her face. What do you mean? Richard asked, voice quieter now, but colder somehow. Grace hesitated. Her fingers curled tighter around the strap of her worn canvas bag. I mean, Lily was alone, she said softly. And scared. Richard scoffed, though something uneasy shifted behind his eyes. You expect me to believe my security suddenly failed and somehow you became the hero? The humiliation burned sharp across Grace's face. She lowered her gaze for half a second, the kind of silence people used when they were used to not being believed. No, sir, she said. I just think you should watch the footage before you throw that letter away. Downstairs, thunder cracked again. Somewhere deep in the mansion, the heating system groaned awake, warm air humming through hidden vents. Richard looked toward Lily. Still asleep. Strange. Too strange. For weeks, bedtime had been chaos. Crying. Night terrors. Specialists charging thousands an hour with no answers. Yet tonight, after Grace crossed every boundary imaginable, Lily slept like the storm outside did not exist. His throat tightened, irritation mixing with something he hated feeling. Doubt. You have 30 seconds, he said finally. Grace nodded once. No triumph. No attitude. Just tiredness. She was having trouble breathing, Grace said carefully. Richard's eyes narrowed instantly. Excuse me? I found her under her mother's vanity table. She was shaking. Grace glanced toward the medicine bottle on the nightstand. That prescription, something felt wrong. Richard's face darkened again. Are you a doctor now? No. Her voice stayed calm. Too calm. But my younger brother had severe panic episodes. Same shaking. Same confusion. Richard laughed once, sharp and bitter. So the maid diagnosed my daughter because she cleaned near medicine cabinets? The words landed hard. Grace blinked slowly, swallowing whatever hurt flashed across her face. Still, she did not snap back. Did not defend herself. That somehow unsettled him even more. I called the emergency nurse listed on the fridge, she said quietly. No answer. Richard froze. The emergency number. Almost nobody knew it existed. How do you know? About that? Grace hesitated again. Because Lily showed me. Silence. Heavy and uncomfortable. Rainwater dripped steadily from Richard's coat onto the hardwood floor. Somewhere downstairs, a glass shifted faintly as the wind rattled the house. Lily stirred in bed, whispering something in her sleep. Mommy. Richard's face changed for a split second. Barely noticeable. But Grace saw it. She keeps looking for her mother, Grace whispered. Especially during storms. Richard looked away instantly, jaw flexing hard enough to ache. You are out of line. Maybe, Grace said softly. But she was scared enough to hide under furniture. He hated that sentence. Hated how specific it sounded. Hated that he had no answer for it. Richard reached for the folded letter beside the lamp, irritation boiling back to the surface. Fine, he muttered. I will read your little explanation after you leave. Grace gave one small nod and turned toward the door. Her footsteps were quiet against the hardwood. Invisible. Like they always were in this house. But just before she stepped into the hallway, she stopped. Without turning around, she said, Sir, if Lily wakes up coughing again, do not give her another pill. Richard stiffened instantly. What? Grace finally looked back. Her eyes glistened under the amber light, exhausted but steady. Please check the label. A beat. It was already open when I found it. Richard's chest tightened. His gaze snapped toward the bottle on the nightstand. Half empty. The cap slightly crooked. And suddenly, for the first time all night, he realized he had never checked who refilled Lily's prescriptions after the house nurse quit 3 weeks ago. Richard Whitmore grabbed the prescription bottle so fast it nearly slipped from his hand. The amber light from Lily's bedside lamp reflected across the label, cold and sharp against his fingertips. His jaw tightened. Refill date 6 days ago. Prescribed dosage unchanged. But something felt wrong. The cap sat crooked. The seal looked tampered with. Behind him, Grace stood quietly near the doorway, soaked coat hanging from one shoulder like she already knew she would not be believed. You touched this? Richard asked, voice low, dangerous again. Grace shook her head slowly. No, sir. But Lily said the pills make her feel funny now. The sentence landed strangely hard. Richard looked toward his daughter. Her breathing had changed. Too shallow. Too uneven. A quiet rasp filled the room, almost hidden beneath the storm outside. His stomach tightened. Lily? No answer. Just sleep. Or something heavier than sleep. Richard moved quickly to the bed, fingers brushing her forehead. Warm. Too warm. Behind him, Grace stepped forward instinctively. She did that downstairs too, she said carefully. The coughing starts first. Richard turned sharply. Stop acting like you know my daughter better than I do. The words cut hard. But even as he said them, his hand hovered uncertainly over Lily's blanket. Because he had missed this. Somehow he had missed this. The billionaire who controlled billion-dollar acquisitions, private jets, entire hospital wings in his family's name, had not noticed his own daughter looked exhausted for weeks. Grace lowered her eyes for half a second. Humiliation flashed across her face, then disappeared beneath something steadier. Resolve. You asked me to clean the east hallway, she said quietly. I heard her coughing every night through the vents. Richard looked at her, irritation rising again. And somehow the maid became a medical expert. Grace swallowed. No. Just observant. The silence stretched thin. Tight. Somewhere downstairs, thunder rolled low across the estate. Then suddenly Lily coughed. Once. Twice. Hard enough to make her small shoulders jolt beneath the blanket. Richard's face drained instantly. Lily? Her eyes fluttered halfway open. Confused. Dazed. Daddy? Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Then she looked past him. Straight to Grace. Tiny fingers lifting weakly toward the doorway. Miss Grace. The room froze. Richard turned slowly. His daughter had barely spoken to anyone in weeks. Therapists. Doctors. Nurses. Nothing. But now, half awake, frightened and trembling, she reached for the woman he had just fired. Grace hesitated only a second before stepping closer. Careful. Respectful. Like she knew. Crossing invisible lines in this house came with consequences. Hey, sweetheart, Grace whispered, crouching beside the bed. Her voice softened in a way Richard had never heard before. Can you take a deep breath for me? Lily tried. Failed. Coughed again. Panic flickered across Richard's face. What is happening? Grace glanced at the medicine bottle still in his hand. How long has she been taking the new refill? Richard frowned. What do you mean, new refill? Grace looked up slowly. Her expression changed. Not fear. Concern. Sir, she said carefully. The pharmacy label says her medication was switched to adult dosage. Silence. Absolute silence. Richard blinked once. Twice. That is impossible. Grace stood slowly now, pulse visible at her neck. Then why does this bottle have somebody else's prescription number under the sticker? Richard froze. His fingers tightened around the bottle. And for the first time all night, he noticed something he should have seen immediately. Under the pharmacy label, another name was partially visible. Torn. Hidden. But still there. Not Lily Whitmore. Not even close. Before he could speak, his phone vibrated sharply in his pocket. One new security alert. Basement garage access detected. 12:14 a.m. Someone was inside the house. The phone buzzed again. Basement garage access detected. Richard Whitmore's stomach dropped. The cold blue glow of the security alert reflected across his face while thunder rattled the windows hard enough to shake the glass. Upstairs, Lily coughed again, weaker this time, curled into herself beneath the blanket. Grace stepped closer to the bed instinctively, one hand hovering near the little girl without touching her. Sir? she said quietly, eyes locked on Lily's breathing. She should not be this sleepy. Richard looked between his daughter and the phone screen, pulse pounding louder than the storm. Nobody should be in my garage. His voice hardened instantly, slipping back into control even as panic clawed at the edges. He turned toward the bedroom door. Stay here. Grace blinked. Richard, if somebody switched her medication. He stopped cold at the sound of his first name. Slowly, he turned back. The silence between them tightened. You do not call me Richard, he said sharply. The humiliation landed instantly. Grace lowered her eyes. Sorry, sir. But then Lily whimpered softly, tiny fingers reaching weakly toward Grace again. Please, do not go. The room froze. Richard stared. His daughter had barely spoken in days. Yet she clung to the woman he had treated like furniture. Something twisted hard in his chest. Still, pride fought back fast. You are not family, he muttered, more to himself than anyone. Grace swallowed. No, she said quietly. But she is scared. Another cough. Worse this time. Richard cursed under his breath and looked at his phone again. Garage camera offline. Motion detected. Then another alert flashed. Medication cabinet access, unauthorized. His face changed instantly. That cabinet is biometric, he said under his breath. Grace's eyes narrowed slightly. Who has access? Richard hesitated. Too long. The house nurse, he said finally. But she quit 3 weeks ago. Grace looked at the bottle again. The torn label. The hidden name beneath it. Her voice lowered. Careful. Measured. Then somebody stayed involved after they left. Richard hated how reasonable she sounded. Hated that the woman he fired 20 minutes ago was suddenly the only person asking the questions he should have asked first. Downstairs, the house alarm beeped faintly. One long electronic tone cutting through the storm. Then silence. Richard moved fast, grabbing the bedroom landline. No signal. His jaw flexed hard. Of course. He pulled out his phone and opened the garage feed manually. Static. Flickering shadows. Then movement. Someone in a dark raincoat crossing between the luxury cars downstairs. Heat from the garage engine sensors painted red streaks across the screen. One vehicle had been running recently. Richard's pulse spiked. Nobody should even know I am home, he muttered. Grace looked toward Lily again. Her breathing sounded rougher now, thin and strained beneath the storm outside. Sir, if she stops responding, you need emergency services now. Richard snapped back instantly. I know how to take care of my daughter. But even he heard it. The desperation under his own voice. The fear. Grace stepped carefully toward the dresser. Not touching anything. Just observing. Her eyes landed on something half hidden beneath Lily's stuffed rabbit. A folded pharmacy receipt. Crumpled. Damp around the edges. She unfolded it slowly. Her expression changed immediately. Sir? Richard looked over impatiently. What now? Grace turned the receipt toward him, fingers trembling slightly. Same prescription number. Same refill date. But the pickup signature at the bottom was not his. Not the nurse's either. Richard stepped closer. The overhead lamp reflected sharply across the ink. One name. Signed clearly. Veronica Whitmore. His younger sister. The woman currently staying in the guest wing downstairs. The same woman who insisted Lily needed stronger medication to calm her down. Richard stopped breathing for half a second. Then, from somewhere deep below the house, came the low rumble of an engine starting. The engine roared louder. Deep. Violent. Echoing through the mansion like something trying to escape. Richard Whitmore did not move for half a second. Veronica's signature blurred in his shaking hand while rain hammered against the windows hard enough to rattle the glass. Upstairs, Lily coughed again. Weak. Thin. Too weak. Grace stepped closer to the bed instinctively, pulse hammering in her throat. Sir, somebody is leaving. she said quietly. Richard looked up sharply. My sister would never. But the sentence died halfway out. Because even he did not sound convinced. Another security alert flashed across his phone. Guest wing biometric door opened. Garage exit pending. Richard swore under his breath and stormed toward the hallway, expensive shoes striking hardwood like warning shots. Stay with Lily, he barked. Grace hesitated. She needs a doctor now. Richard turned so fast the tension cracked between them. And somehow you know more than every specialist I hired? The humiliation hit hard. Again. Grace lowered her eyes for a split second. But then Lily let out a shaky breath that sounded wrong. Too shallow. Too slow. Grace looked directly at Richard for the first time all night. Calm. Steady. Certain. No, she said softly. I just listened when she told me something felt wrong. Silence. Sharp. Uncomfortable. Richard hated that sentence. Hated how small it made him feel in his own house. The billionaire who controlled companies, politicians, entire hospital wings, had somehow missed the child coughing behind his own walls. His phone buzzed again. Garage gate opening. Vehicle departure in 30 seconds. Richard snapped into motion. Do not touch anything, he muttered, already moving. Then paused. Looking at Lily. Looking at Grace. Pride and panic tearing at each other inside him. Finally, through clenched teeth. Call emergency services if she gets worse. Grace blinked once. Not because of the order. Because it was the first time all night he had trusted her with anything. Barely. But enough. Richard disappeared down the hall. Thunder swallowed the sound of his footsteps. Downstairs, the mansion shifted into chaos. Security alarms beeped faintly through hidden speakers. Cold white lights flickered alive across the marble entryway. The garage elevator opened with a metallic hiss. Richard stepped inside, chest tight, rain still dripping from his coat. His phone camera feed flickered again. Static. Then movement. A black SUV idling near the exit ramp, exhaust curling through the concrete garage like smoke. Veronica Whitmore stood beside it. Calm. Composed. Designer coat untouched by panic. 2 duffel bags at her feet. Richard stopped cold. Veronica? His voice echoed across the concrete walls. She turned slowly, expression unreadable. Not guilty. Not surprised. Almost annoyed. You should be upstairs, she said coolly. With Lily. Richard held up the pharmacy receipt, hand trembling despite himself. Why is your name on her medication? For the first time, something flickered across Veronica's face. Not fear. Irritation. Do not start this tonight. The SUV engine vibrated harder, warm headlights reflecting off chrome pillars and polished concrete. One security guard stepped forward uncertainly, eyes darting between them. Camera phones quietly lifted from staff farther back. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Richard's voice cracked sharper now. Louder. Did you switch my daughter's medication? Veronica exhaled hard, crossing her arms. You were falling apart, she snapped. She was uncontrollable. Crying every night. I helped. Richard stared at her. Helped? Her expression hardened. You were embarrassing yourself. Investors notice things, Richard. A billionaire with a sick child who cannot even sleep? It affects confidence. The words landed like ice water. Around them, silence spread. One guard looked away. Another shifted uncomfortably. Richard's face drained of color. Upstairs, miles away but somehow still close, his daughter struggled to breathe while his sister talked about optics. Then Veronica said the thing that shattered whatever control he had left. Besides, she added coldly, glancing toward the elevator, that Maid already knows too much. Richard froze instantly. What did you just say? Veronica's eyes shifted. Just for a second. Toward the dark back seat of the SUV. And suddenly, somebody inside the vehicle moved. The garage went still. Not quiet. Still. The kind of silence that felt dangerous. The SUV engine hummed low, heat rippling faintly above the hood, while fluorescent lights reflected cold against the polished black paint. Richard Whitmore did not blink. His pulse pounded harder than the storm outside as the back seat shifted again. One security guard lowered his phone slowly. Another stopped mid-step, suddenly unsure whose side he was standing on. Veronica crossed her arms tighter. Calm on the surface. Too calm. Richard, she said softly, now voice lower, controlled. You are exhausted. Go upstairs. He barely heard her. His eyes stayed fixed on the tinted rear window. Somebody inside moved again. Slow. Deliberate. Then stillness. The garage air felt heavier somehow, warm engine exhaust mixing with cold rain drifting through the open gate. Richard's phone vibrated faintly in his hand. Upstairs, emergency services connected. No answer yet. His jaw flexed hard. Lily. Upstairs, Lily. But something about Veronica's face unsettled him more than panic ever could. She looked prepared. Too prepared. Like she had already imagined this exact moment. Who is in the car? Richard asked quietly. The softness in his voice felt worse than shouting. Veronica looked away for half a second. Tiny. Almost invisible. But everyone saw it. Security exchanged glances. One housekeeper near the elevator pressed her lips together, nervous fingers tightening around her phone. Veronica exhaled slowly. Nobody you need to worry about. Richard laughed once. Sharp. Empty. That is not an answer. Upstairs, 3 floors above, Grace Miller sat beside Lily's bed in the soft amber glow of the bedside lamp. No panic now. No rushing. Just quiet pressure pressing against every breath in the room. Lily's tiny chest rose unevenly beneath the blanket. The medicine bottle sat untouched beside Grace, label peeled halfway back. Grace's fingers moved slowly across the crumpled pharmacy receipt again. Same prescription number. Wrong dosage. Wrong pickup signature. But something else bothered her. Her eyes narrowed. Tiny print near the bottom corner. Prescriber modification approved. Emergency authorization. Her expression changed instantly. Slow. Careful. Cold realization. No, she whispered under her breath. Lily stirred weakly beside her. Miss Grace? Grace looked down immediately, voice softening. Hey, sweetheart. Lily's small hand reached toward her sleeve. Weak. Trembling. Do not let Aunt Veronica take me again. The room stopped breathing. Grace froze completely. Take you where? Lily hesitated. Her lip trembled slightly. The sleeping room. Grace's stomach dropped. Children use strange words for frightening things. She knew that. But something about the way Lily whispered it, rehearsed, frightened, familiar. Downstairs, Richard stepped closer to the SUV. His expensive shoes echoed against concrete, slow and deliberate. Nobody moved to stop him. Not security. Not Veronica. But tension hung across the garage like wire pulled too tight. Open the door, Richard said quietly. Veronica's voice sharpened instantly. Richard, stop. Too fast. Too emotional. For the first time all night, her control slipped. Everyone noticed. Richard noticed. His expression changed. Something colder settling into place. Why are you scared? He asked. Veronica swallowed hard. Tiny movement. Barely there. Then Richard's phone buzzed again. Incoming call, Grace Miller. Upstairs to downstairs. House line override. He answered immediately. What? Grace did not waste a second. Her breathing sounded calm. Too calm. Sir? She said quietly. Lily says this is not the first time. Silence swallowed the garage whole. Richard stopped moving. Behind the tinted glass of the SUV, somebody slowly lifted a hand against the window from inside. The entire garage stopped breathing. Richard Whitmore stood frozen, phone pressed to his ear, while the faint shape of a hand remained against the SUV window. Pale. Small. Trembling. The engine hummed low beneath the silence, warm exhaust curling into the cold concrete air. Veronica stepped forward too quickly. "Richard," she said sharply, voice suddenly thinner than before. "This is not what you think." But nobody looked at her anymore. Security guards exchanged uneasy glances. One housekeeper lowered her phone halfway, eyes wide. Even the driver near the front seat shifted uncomfortably, sweat visible along his collar beneath the fluorescent lights. Upstairs, Grace Miller sat beside Lily's bed, pulse steady despite the storm raging outside. Her hand rested lightly over the little girl's shaking fingers. "Lily," she said softly, voice calm enough to cut through panic. "What is the sleeping room?" Lily swallowed hard. Tiny breaths. Tiny pauses. "Downstairs," she whispered. "And Veronica said Daddy was too busy." Grace's stomach tightened. But her face stayed calm. Controlled. The kind of calm that only came from people who had learned how to survive being ignored. "Did she take you there alone?" Lily hesitated. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. Then she nodded. "Once. Small. Fragile. Sometimes another girl was there." Silence. Grace looked slowly toward the medicine bottle again. Wrong dosage. Wrong signature. Wrong story. Her pulse slowed instead of quickening. Something was connecting now. Upstairs, downstairs, garage. Too many things moving at once. "Sir," Grace said quietly into the phone, her voice suddenly firmer. "Do not let that car leave." Downstairs, Richard's expression shifted. For the first time all night, he did not interrupt her. Did not question her. He listened. That alone unsettled everyone watching. Veronica noticed it instantly. "Richard, she is a maid," she snapped, desperation creeping through polished edges now. "You are seriously taking parenting advice from somebody you hired to clean floors?" The humiliation landed in the open air like an old habit. A familiar cruelty. But this time, it did not work. Richard looked at Veronica slowly. Really looked at her. Then back at the SUV window. The small hand pressed harder against the glass now. Weak. Almost pleading. His throat tightened. "Open the door," he said quietly. Nobody moved. The driver looked at Veronica. Veronica looked away. Richard's voice dropped lower. More dangerous somehow. "I said open the damn door." The security chief stepped forward immediately. Nervous hands. Quick movements. The rear SUV door unlocked with a soft metallic click. Silence swallowed the garage whole. Then the door opened. A little girl sat curled beneath a blanket in the back seat. Maybe 9 years old. Pale. Exhausted. Hospital wristband hanging loose from one wrist. Her eyes fluttered weakly beneath garage lights too bright for a child that tired. The entire room shifted. One housekeeper gasped quietly. Somebody whispered, "Oh my God!" Veronica stepped forward instantly. "It is not what it looks like." Richard did not even look at her. Because the little girl looked strangely familiar. Too familiar. Then his stomach dropped. He had seen her before. Not in person. In photographs. Fundraiser photographs. Missing child posters his foundation had publicly donated to 6 months ago. Emily Torres. Missing since February. Richard took one slow step back. The fluorescent light reflected sharply across his stunned face. Upstairs, Grace listened to the silence on the line. Too much silence. Then Richard spoke again. Quiet. Shaken. Unrecognizable. "Grace." He stopped halfway through her name like the word itself felt heavier now. "You were right." The garage air shifted. Security guards looked at Grace's name glowing on Richard's phone screen like something sacred suddenly earned. The maid. The invisible woman. The one they all watched get humiliated upstairs less than an hour ago. Somehow, she had seen what nobody else had. But before Richard could say another word, Lily's voice cracked softly from the bedroom upstairs. Weak. Barely above a whisper. Miss Grace. Grace looked down immediately. Lily's trembling hand tightened around her sleeve. Eyes wide now. Terrified. And Veronica said, if I told Daddy. Her lip trembled harder. He would disappear too. Like Mommy. Lily's words hung in the bedroom like something fragile and devastating all at once. Grace Miller did not move. The amber bedside lamp cast soft light across Lily's trembling face while rain slid slowly down the tall windows behind them. Like Mommy, Lily whispered again, smaller this time, voice cracking beneath fear she was too young to carry. Grace's chest tightened, but her expression stayed steady. Calm. The kind of calm built from surviving storms other people never noticed. She brushed a loose curl from Lily's forehead gently. Hey, she whispered, voice warm enough to slow panic. You are safe right now. Downstairs, silence swallowed the garage whole. Richard Whitmore stood frozen in front of the SUV, phone still pressed to his ear, while Emily Torres blinked weakly beneath fluorescent lights that suddenly felt too harsh for something this human. Security guards shifted awkwardly. One lowered his head. Another quietly stopped recording. Nobody looked at Veronica anymore. They looked at Richard. Waiting. Watching. Wondering how a billionaire known for control had somehow missed the truth inside his own walls. Richard swallowed hard. His voice came quieter now. Fragile in a way nobody there had ever heard. Grace. He looked toward the concrete floor for half a second. What did Lily say? Upstairs, Grace hesitated. Her fingers rested lightly against Lily's small hand. She glanced toward the medicine bottle again, then toward the rain-dark hallway outside the bedroom. The house suddenly felt colder than before. She said Veronica scared her. Grace answered softly. No accusation. No triumph. Just truth. Richard closed his eyes briefly. The fluorescent garage lights reflected sharply across the tension in his face. Around him, whispers spread quietly among staff. Tiny. Careful. Nobody wanted to be the first to say what everyone was already thinking. The maid knew. The maid saw it. The maid had been right. Veronica finally stepped forward again, voice sharper now, defensive cracks breaking through polished control. Richard, this is insane. You are listening to her? Her eyes flicked briefly toward Grace's name glowing on his phone screen. The contempt was still there. Familiar. Old. But weaker now. Richard looked up slowly. Something in him had changed. Not anger. Worse. Recognition. I fired her tonight, he said quietly, almost to himself. Because I thought she crossed a line. Silence answered him. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Nearby, the SUV engine had finally gone quiet, only soft ticking metal left cooling beneath fluorescent light. One housekeeper near the elevator wiped tears from her face quietly. Another looked away, ashamed. Because everyone had seen it. Seen Grace ignored. Dismissed. Spoken over like she was invisible. Upstairs, emergency services finally connected through the speakerphone. Calm voices. Medical questions. Grace answered each one without hesitation, kneeling beside Lily while gently counting breaths under her own. Steady. Focused. No panic. No performance. Just care. Has she responded to the medication? The dispatcher asked. Grace glanced at the bottle. Wrong dosage. Wrong label. Wrong trust. No, she answered softly. I think she has been overmedicated. Downstairs, Richard heard every word. His throat tightened harder. Overmedicated. The word echoed ugly inside his chest. He thought about every meeting he chose over dinner. Every bedtime story skipped. Every moment he assumed money had fixed what attention never touched. Then quietly, almost too quietly to hear, he said something nobody expected. Bring Grace back. The sentence landed across the garage harder than shouting. Security looked up immediately. Even Veronica blinked. Richard turned slowly, eyes glassy now, pride cracking in places nobody had ever seen before. No, he corrected himself quietly. Bring her wherever she wants to be. She saved my daughter. Upstairs, Grace heard it through the phone and froze for half a second. No satisfaction. No victory. Just silence. Then Lily squeezed her hand weakly. Tiny fingers. Tiny trust. Miss Grace? Lily whispered. Will Daddy stay this time? Grace looked toward the dark hallway outside the room. The house felt quieter now. But not safer. Not yet. Somewhere downstairs, voices suddenly rose again. Sharp. Nervous. Then one security guard shouted across the garage, panic breaking through the calm. Sir. He turned pale, holding up his phone. The guest wing security footage from last month just came back online. Richard looked up slowly. Because standing beside Veronica in the footage was somebody he thought had disappeared forever. The garage fell into a different kind of silence. Not fear anymore. Something heavier. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead while rain slowed outside, slipping down the open entrance in thin silver lines. Richard Whitmore stood motionless, staring at the recovered security footage on the guard's shaking phone. Beside Veronica in the guest wing hallway, framed beneath cold security lights from 3 weeks earlier, stood Eleanor Whitmore's former private physician. The same doctor who had signed Lily's medication adjustments. The same doctor Richard personally fired after his wife died. Richard's breath caught hard. That is impossible, he whispered. But even he did not believe it. The footage rolled silently. Veronica speaking quickly. The doctor handing over a cooler case. Lily in pajamas half asleep between them. Tiny shoulders. Small hands rubbing frightened eyes. No resistance. Just trust. Emily Torres appeared briefly in the background too, sitting quietly in a chair no child should have recognized. Somebody in the garage lowered their phone completely. Another housekeeper covered her mouth. Nobody whispered anymore. Nobody defended Veronica. The room had moved beyond disbelief. Richard looked slowly at his sister. Really looked at her for the first time in years. She no longer looked powerful. Just tired. Cornered. Human in the ugliest way. Veronica crossed her arms tighter against herself, mascara smudged. Faintly beneath cold garage light. You were drowning, she said quietly, voice brittle now. After Eleanor died, you stopped seeing anything. Lily cried every night. Investors were asking questions. The board was nervous. I did what I thought would stabilize things. Richard stared at her, stunned by the coldness of the logic. Stabilize. Like his daughter had become a public relations problem instead of a child. Upstairs, Grace sat beside Lily while paramedics moved quietly through the room now, their voices low, respectful. Machines beeped softly. One medic adjusted a monitor while another carefully reviewed the medication bottle. You caught this early, the medic said quietly to Grace. Another day or two. He stopped himself. Did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Grace looked toward Lily instead. Her small hand still wrapped weakly around Grace's sleeve, refusing to let go. Miss Grace? Lily whispered sleepily. Daddy is coming back, right? Grace paused. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain drifting through cracked windows. Then softly, steady as always, she said, I think he is trying to find his way back. Downstairs, Richard finally moved. Slow steps across concrete. No anger now. No billionaire posture. Just exhaustion settling into his shoulders. He looked toward Emily sitting weakly in the SUV, then toward the security team. Call the police, he said quietly. Nobody hesitated this time. Veronica closed her eyes briefly. Not fighting anymore. Somewhere overhead, the garage door motor slowed to a stop, the sound fading into stillness. Richard's phone vibrated softly in his hand. Grace. Upstairs. For a moment, he just stared at her name glowing on the screen. The same woman he humiliated. Fired. Dismissed. The same woman who saw what he refused to see. Slowly, he answered. How is she? His voice sounded smaller now. Honest. Grace glanced toward Lily sleeping easier beneath warm blankets, oxygen levels finally climbing. She is resting, Grace said quietly. Silence stretched between them. Gentle now. Heavy in a different way. Then Richard exhaled shakily. I was wrong about you. The sentence landed quietly. But harder than shouting ever could. Grace looked down for a second. No smile. No triumph. Just tired understanding. You were scared, she said softly. People miss things when they are hurting. Downstairs, Richard closed his eyes briefly. Because somehow, that hurt worse than blame. Dawn had started creeping through the storm clouds by the time he returned upstairs. The mansion felt different now. Quieter. Smaller somehow. Outside Lily's bedroom, Richard stopped. Grace sat beside the bed, shoes still damp from rain, coat folded neatly over the chair. Exhaustion lined her face. But she stayed. Lily slept peacefully between them for the first time in months. Richard stood in the doorway for a long moment before quietly stepping inside. Then, without a word, he bent down and picked up the envelope he had almost thrown away hours earlier. Grace's letter. The paper had softened slightly from damp air. He looked at it, then at her. Slowly, carefully, he placed it back on the nightstand beside Lily's bed like something sacred. No orders. No pride. Just respect. Morning light spilled softly through the window, catching the edge of Grace's tired face while Lily's small hand reached out in her sleep and found both of theirs at once. And for the first time since Eleanor died, nobody pulled away.